Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
We're so very close to electing a completely new city council and mayor. And today on CityCast Portland, we're wrapping up our series of mayoral candidate interviews that we taped back in the summer. When we last spoke with mayoral hopeful Keith Wilson a few months ago, not many of us had heard of him, but with a mounting controversy surrounding the early frontrunners in the election and his popular single-issue platform of ending unsheltered homelessness in his first year, Wilson has appeared as the dark horse in the race, even outpolling the more established candidates. Joining me at the top of the interview to fill you in on how the race has changed since our conversation with Wilson is our very own executive producer, John Atariani. It's Wednesday, October 30th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Well, John, thanks again for being here.
Always a pleasure. Hey, Claudia.
Well, Keith Wilson's an interesting candidate. I feel like until recently, most people didn't even know who he was. I remember when you brought him up as a mayoral candidate interview back in June, I was like, who?
Yeah.
So for listeners who are still catching up, want to bring us all up to speed to who Keith Wilson is?
Yeah, I mean, Claudia, I think a lot of people felt that way. But yeah, Keith Wilson, president and CEO of Titan Freight Systems. They are a regional transportation company. Pretty interestingly, they have a fleet of all-electric trucks, which is pretty cool. He's also the founder of the nonprofit Shelter Portland, and they're all about addressing homelessness in the city. He hasn't held elected office before, but also this isn't his first race. He did unsuccessfully run for city council in 2020. Also interesting, he's been running basically as a single-issue candidate. He says that he really wants to make major moves in combating unsheltered homelessness during his first year in office.
I gotta say, I was impressed after we spoke, just because, again, the communication skills. I felt like I was having an actual conversation with someone going back and forth, and he really appreciated the prodding. It seemed like he had been doing research on this issue for years, like even going to other cities and checking out their systems. And it just happens this single issue campaign, it's the issue that resonates the most with Portlanders currently, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to dispute that it's a very, very, if not the most important one. You know, and he's been campaigning really hard. He has the most individual campaign donors of anyone in the mayor's race. As of Monday, the 28th, 2,043 people had contributed to his campaign. And Claudia, I think he really prides himself on that sort of presence and accessibility that you sort of allude to in the interview we had with him. I heard a story recently from a local business owner. He wanted to talk to Wilson about an issue he was having in his neighborhood. So this guy reached out to a city council candidate who he knew. The message got forwarded along. And within the 10 minutes, Keith Wilson was on the phone.
Yeah. I mean, that accessibility will probably change if he does become mayor. It's something we probably should. Keith Wilson on the phone with you in less than 10 minutes, guaranteed.
Or your vote's back, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like his message is breaking through. For most of the summer, pretty much everyone thought this was a head-to-head race like I did, like you did, like we all did, between Carmen. Well, actually, no, you thought it was maps. Between Carmen Rubio and Renee Gonzalez. But a few weeks ago, the Oregonian poll, it showed him as a frontrunner. Once, the ranked choice voting tally came through, Wilson ended up beating Renee Gonzalez 53% to 47%. And again, initial poll, over 30% were undecided.
That poll shocked, I think, everyone. But with that frontrunner status, there is a lot more scrutiny on Wilson than there had been in the weeks and months before that. And I think we have seen a number of stories coming out that are complicating his image. The Oregonian published a story last week that showed he'd failed to pay a portion of his business property taxes for nearly a year. And when he was asked, Wilson said it was a clerical error. He paid up. But then the Willamette Week reported that he'd given campaign donations to 49 other Portland candidates over the past 7 months. Also, his wife and his college-age children were all making dozens of donations as well. Perfectly legal, but it, raises an eyebrow in terms of potentially trying to game the city's public campaign finance system.
Yeah, I read that investigation and sort of came up with the same thing that most people did of like, so this sounds perfectly legal.
But my point is that, this is sort of the first, burst of press about Wilson as well.
For sure.
So,
sure.
there might be people that are coming at him for the first time and are like, wait, who is this guy? What's the story? Yeah.
Yeah, but he's still coming out clean is what I'm saying. What kind of endorsements has Wilson received? I wonder if he's gotten any late last minute endorsements now that people are like, oh, this horse is winning. Let's bet on him,
Well, he hasn't gotten a ton of endorsements from political heavy hitters up to this point. Interestingly, though, we mentioned his nonprofit and that he has been sort of doing this research and forging relationships about homelessness issues outside of Portland. So he does have some endorsements from figures outside of Portland. Mark Johnston, who was President Obama's assistant secretary to reduce homelessness, has endorsed him. And the former mayor of Boise, Idaho, has endorsed him as well. So I don't know what that adds up to, but I think it's interesting. You don't see former Boise mayors weighing in on the Portland mayor's race very often.
Yeah, I did see he's gotten some pretty solid labor endorsements, one from SEIU, Local 49, which has more than 15,000 members throughout Oregon and Southwest Washington, and then one from UFCW 555, which is Oregon's largest private sector labor union with 35,000 members. And they also were the architects of Measure 119, which allows cannabis workers to unionize.
Totally. I think some of the most interesting things, though, is his media endorsements. The Portland Mercury ranked him second behind Carmen Rubio, and Willamette Week ranked him as their number one candidate. They said this about his homelessness plan, quote, "The city has suffered immeasurably because two warring factions, business and nonprofits, have refused to consider that their approaches are insufficient. Wilson offers a starting point for resetting the conversation. His enthusiasm for solving the problem is unflagging. Perhaps that's something we shouldn't scoff at, but instead ask for more from our elected officials." So, Willamette Week's all in.
Well, Oregonian polls aside, what do you think Wilson's chances are to win this race?
I mean, he's clearly seen a huge surge in attention in the last month or so. I mean, like we said, for much of the race, he was considered a very long shot. Now he's solidly a front runner in the race, and a lot of people are just now starting to get to know him. And that could be a boon. He could sort of play as being like the fresh face for people who are disgruntled with the current city government. It could also be a liability. We'll see if some of this more critical press that he's been receiving catches up with him and sort of dampens his chances in the next week.
Yeah, well, I know they've already done that deep dive on his driving record. He also came out clean. Just now, I'm like,
is this checked? Yeah.
Yeah, is this a new Portland standard? We're just like, all right, how many tickets do you have? But if we just go just by pulse, what's going on the streets, John? If you look at Nextdoor, if you look at Reddit, Keith Wilson's name is being mentioned a whole lot. Mm-hmm. So I feel like he might have a very good chance. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's get to our interview with Keith Wilson that we originally taped back in the summer after a short break. Hey Portland, do you know who you're voting for? If you're still researching your options, the League of Women Voters has a ton of resources to make voting easier for you. You can find reliable, nonpartisan, free information at lwvpdx.org, like videos and podcasts of candidate interviews. There's also balanced explanations of ballot measures. And this week, the League is also sponsoring a walk-in voter information table at the Community for Positive Aging at 1820 Northeast East 40th Avenue. Volunteers will be there on Tuesday, October 29th and Thursday, October 31st from noon to 3 p.m. and also on Tuesday, November 4th from 1 to 3 p.m. Stop by to get help with using a ranked choice ballot or go to lwvpdx.org or vote411.org to learn more about the candidates and measures.
Why is Laura Stribe running for Portland City Council in District 2? Because Laura believes Portland is about community. She's lived in St. John's for over 20 years. It's about connection. Laura has been committed to advancing the arts, education, and listening to community. And it's about collaboration. Laura will work with folks to get things done. Laura is hopeful with the new charter reform and ranked choice voting that Portland can enter a new era of representation, investment in community, and fiscal responsibility. Arts and culture is what keeps our economy going and our city vibrant. Safety and affordability is what we demand for all Portlanders to ensure our neighbors can thrive and live with dignity. Our planet needs a green lens going forward as we upgrade our infrastructure and prepare for forthcoming natural disasters. Together, we can create a Portland to be proud of. Vote this November and rank Laura Stribe #1 for Portland City Council in District 2. Paid for by Friends of Run Laura Run.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's early November, a month that's traditionally all about gratitude. So I wanted to take a moment to, thank ourselves, not only for making it through another year, but for trying our best in a crazy, crazy world. And we all know it isn't easy. Plus, with the incoming holiday season, it's just gonna get harder. But one of the ways people are finding relief is through talk therapy. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and empowering you to be the best version of yourself, not only for others like coworkers, friends, and family, but for yourself. Think of it as a great way to say thank you to yourself. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/citycast today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/citycast. How would you like me to refer to you? Would you like Mr. Wilson, Keith, KW?
No, if we were in like 11th grade, it'd be Wee Willie Wilson, but we're going to stay away from that one.
Wee Willie Wilson, that's awful.
Not my favorite. And that was one of the nicer ones, so we'll stick with that one.
Oh, I don't like that one bit. Let's go back in time and kick some ass.
It's all good, then. Just Keith.
Okay, Keith. Thank you.
Yeah. You bet.
One of your mayoral platforms I found very interesting. It's making the 2040 Cascadia Olympics happen, which is Portland, Seattle, Vancouver coming together and hosting the Summer Olympics. Is this a movement or is this just a Keith dream?
Well, I want people to know that the best days are in front of us. We're so focused on what's going on in the humanitarian crisis. We need to know that we're going to get through the troubles we're experiencing right now because all communities have. And we will, but let's always have that North Star on what can make our region great. But Claudia, that's also tied in with my executive membership with the U.S. High-Speed Rail. So I've been working with the administration and Congress on funding high-speed rail, which is the Cascadia. Mm-hmm. And if we have a spectacle at the end of that very large project, it really is how we drive big projects forward when we have that circle date. Hey, we have to have it done by then. That's how our nation does big projects well when we can do them fast. So that's that North Star. Like, hey, everybody, if we built the high-speed rail along this very important mega region, New Main Street, we could have the first bi-country multi-city Olympics called the Cascadia. It's that dream, but it's definitely a possibility, but we have to really
I love it.
Put it on paper. Thank you.
Well, I'm curious, what would your sport be? Now imagine different world. Keith, you're not running for mayor, you're an athlete. Like, I know for sure mine would be breakdancing. Grew up breakdancing as a child. What about you, Keith? What would your sport be?
All right. It's always about being a basketball wannabe. So I was the 13th member on my varsity basketball team, but it was only 12 members on the team. So that'll tell you where I sat on the bench. No, truth be told, I was probably number 12 out of 12, but I love basketball. It's always been my passion. I still play. Not well, But come on,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be great to be on the dream team, going to the
yeah,
Olympics,
back in the
and
90s?
hopefully getting a medal?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay. Just thank you for that. I was just curious. Well, if you had to pick just one thing that isn't working in Portland right now, what would it be and how would you fix it? Just pick one thing.
Without a question, and absolutely the most important issue is unsheltered homelessness. It's those individuals in tents, makeshift shelters, and inoperable, unlicensed, uninsured RVs. Those individuals are absolutely suffering. And in that suffering, it's compromised the livability of every single person in Portland. So it affects all of us. And so how I would fix it is I've spent this last 6 years traveling the nation and traveling the world, working with mayors, county officials, and federal officials on learning best practices in cities who have ended unsheltered homelessness. Mm-hmm. So today, I have 10 national leaders who've helped me with a blueprint. They've vetted my plan. Many of them have ended unsheltered homelessness. For instance, the mayor of Boise, who was the appellate on Martin versus Boise, is on my team. I have President Obama's assistant secretary to reduce homelessness on my team. And I have county officials who've ended unsheltered homelessness on my team. And in turn, that blueprint has now created a board, a Shelter Portland board that I put together, a nonprofit. And those board members are all executive directors for local homeless service providers. And Claudia, what we've done this last many years is we've started setting up shelters to proof point what the blueprint is and how it is effective. So I've been partnering with nighttime shelters, and I've been able to deliver nighttime emergency shelters at $16 per person per night. When you compare that with a Safe Rest Village at $167 per night, we can deliver nighttime emergency shelters at 10% of what the city is doing it for. So now we're going to scale that up.
I want to pause you there for 1 sec.
Sure.
So you gave me some numbers, but ultimately what we're trying to do is house these people long term, right?
Absolutely.
So the money sometimes, especially for the Safe Rest, the reason that money is so high is because they're also getting connected to services. There's there's staff on site. Does your funding include that, or is it just, as you said, emergency? Because with the Safe Rest, it's a bit more than emergency. It's actually placing. Will yours also be placing into long-term housing, or is it just going to be an in and out, revolving door of someone getting housed for the night? Because that's what's decided isn't working.
You're right. And Claudia, everything we're talking about, it's a continuum. Mm-hmm. So it's a path that we're working on. First and foremost, we can't have people on the street. It's inhumane, it's unsafe, and it's cruel to everybody. So that's that first and foremost thing. You said, what's that big item I'll be focused on? Now that's the first inning, is absolutely caring for our community and focusing on safety so no one dies on the street. We have 4,000 or 5,000 people on the street, Claudia. 400 of them are going to die this year. That's a public safety emergency. Now, I also opened a day shelter 8 weeks ago in Montevilla on 82nd Avenue and Ash. The day shelter is kind of like that second inning. First inning, save people's lives. Emergency is occurring, humanitarian crisis. Think of it like an earthquake. Mm-hmm. Next inning, second inning is day shelter. How do we help address recovery? How do we then begin to address the root cause to then move them into housing, or to move them to a Safe Rest Village or a temporary alternative shelter or to a 24-hour congregate shelter or housing Multnomah Now into an actual home?
What I'm hearing is that you're not saying, I want to replace the Safe Rest shelters.
Oh, no.
Because you came in with a number and it felt a little like oppositional, like they're doing this, but I'm going to do this. But what you're saying is a supplement.
That's exactly, yeah.
Like that's working, because that is working.
Yes.
But like what we need is nightly shelters. Because here's the deal, Keith. We all know that's what is needed. Everyone's like, we need more shelter beds. We need more shelter beds like yesterday. What's your plan? Like, what do you think you're going to do different that the city isn't doing right now that's going to create these shelter beds in a year, in 2 years?
I'll say it's not known. It's like with our failed city politicians, they continue to think that we need a 24-hour shelter with wraparound services, which is $167 per person per night. We need those, but we don't need to close other shelters. So in 2017, we started closing all of our nighttime shelters, Claudia. We closed shelters in the middle of a humanitarian crisis because they wouldn't move to 24-hour shelter, and that's the Salvation Army female emergency shelters. We don't fund Bybee Lakes completely. We have people literally dying on the street, And so I don't think it's rocket science that I'm professing. In Philadelphia, all they have are nighttime emergency shelters. In Boise, that's all they provide. In Portland, we only provide 24-hour high-cost shelter, which are very expensive to build and set up. All I'm saying is we're going to augment that with standard operating processes that are happening in Boise, in Boston, in Philadelphia, and in New Orleans, all communities that I've visited with, and I've begun to understand how their best practices work. And they don't have people living on the street in their communities. And as mayor, we're not going to have people living on the street here because we're going to provide basic, low-cost, immediate care.
Gotcha. You've been quoted as saying that city politicians and their failed policies are what got us into this mess and cannot be trusted to get us out, that we need real change for our great city. Now, coming from the private sector, what makes you more qualified than experienced city leaders, in your opinion?
Just looking at my professional record. So Titan, the transportation company I own and operate, is generally in an unsafe business. We're 24 hours, budget trucks and docks and such like that. We have the lowest workforce injury rate in the state. My company, we don't use a single gallon of fossil fuel in our Portland fleet. We've removed 84% of fossil fuels throughout our 3-state. Everybody keeps telling me things that I can't do, but if emissions reduction is my core value, we have to do it. And now we have the first fleet of heavy-duty electric trucks. All very difficult things to achieve, Claudia. Mm-hmm. And now because of that, we've received National Innovator of the Year for the last 2 years. So why am I going to be different? A record of innovation, a record of success. And as mayor, it's really a two-sided coin, if you will. You have to have focus on inspiration, understand vision and mission for the city that we're setting up. So just the technical aspect, I'll be managing an $8 billion budget and 7,000 staff members, and understanding and creating a mission so everybody understands where the team is going, where the city is heading, and the focus on service. That's the more technical aspects, right? That's the inspiration. How do we really bring us back to where we're the city that works? But now let's look at it from the operational standpoint.
Keith, I'm so sorry, but I feel like people come in with big ideas. People are people smarter than some of the city leaders? Oh, yes. But then they get into the machine of governorship and they lose their footing because they have to go, oh, I didn't know it worked this way. So I'm asking you, Keith Wilson, you have wonderful ideas. You have a great team and stuff, but you're a CEO.
Yeah, right.
And I feel like a CEO having a control of your own company is going to be so different than working, because the mayor is a weak mayor. You have to work with so many different people. And now with the new iteration of the government, we're going to have, I don't know, so many other voices, 12 new voices. So how do you think you're going to be able to get your ambitious agenda across?
Right. And so executive orders are still a tool of the mayor. And I would say that it's not a weak mayor. The mayor of Portland is going to be able to have budget writing. Budget writing is policy, and that is policy that we're going to be able to determine what's the vision for the city. So complete control over the city government is going to allow me the operational control over ending unsheltered homelessness. So talking about the plan, how do we implement the plan? Essentially, Claudia, it's setting up 12 to 18 nighttime emergency shelters quickly, treating it like it's a public safety emergency. That's all in my purview as mayor. I'm in charge of public safety, infrastructure, and right-of-way. I'll be working collaboratively with the council. That first couple weeks, we're going to declare a public safety emergency to immediately begin the process of setting up those nighttime emergency shelters. I've already begun the conversation of working and talking with every single one of them about, here's what we're going to do. And I'm having the conversation with all Portlanders right now. When you vote for me, we're going to implement this nighttime emergency shelters and the day shelters immediately to end unsheltered homelessness so we can restore public safety in Portland. Now, I've got a plan. I've been working with mayors from around the country already on the plan, and they've been helping me with the technical aspects of what we're going to do. So it's not me coming pie in the sky, but it is a clear goal of what we're going to do in that first year, and also within the first months of taking over as mayor. And you're right, I will work with the council very closely because it's going to affect every community and neighborhood in the city.
So what I'm hearing is you are depending on running executive orders?
Well, the public safety emergency will be worked with our council, and I firmly expect that every single one of them will partner with me on this because, again, we have 4,000 people living on the street. We're going to end that immediately in Portland because we have to.
Now, your platform lists a lot of big and wide-ranging ideas from, as we've been discussing, ending homelessness to ending open drug use. Then we discussed the building high-speed rail and the Olympics.
I try not, Now, those are fun because I want to bring back the dream in Portland.
Right. And you also want to restore confidence in public safety.
Yeah.
Are you thinking these will be achievable within your first 4 years, or what was the timeline for all of this that you're thinking like, oh, this is going to work? I mean, I know we're not going to get a high-speed rail in 4 years, but I'm just saying it's a lot, you know?
Yeah, those are long-term, Claudia. So the high-speed rail and those things, those are long-term goals, but there are more immediate long-term goals. But let's talk about the short-term goals. Next year, in the first 12 months, ending unsheltered homelessness and restoring confidence in our public safety system. And then the third and final is restoring the vitalization or our business climate. And so we talked about homelessness. Let's pivot to that second item, which is restoring public safety. All right. So right now, we generally arrest about 10,000 people per year. And about half of those, or 5,000, are of the unsheltered. Our officers are spending half of their arrest time arresting the same souls over and over again. That's why we have to end unsheltered homelessness first. When we do that, we immediately reduce the arrest rate and our public safety system improves. So a decade ago, it took 6 minutes to respond in a priority call in your worst time of need when you absolutely needed an officer there. Today, it's 24 minutes for an officer to respond. In a medium or low priority call, sometimes they don't show up at all. We have an overloaded, overburdened police workforce that are arresting and criminalizing poverty and the unsheltered and unsheltered homelessness, and they're only about 1% of our population, yet they're consuming 50% of our arrests. That's why when we end unsheltered homelessness quickly, swiftly, at low cost, and immediately, we're restoring public safety. Because if you're in shelter, Claudia, you only represent about 2% of the arrests, or about 200 arrests last year if you're in shelter. That's how we reset our public safety system, and we begin to restore confidence. Community policing. We've disbanded our traffic safety department. We've disbanded a lot of our inspector and detective departments. We now get to start right-sizing our police force back to what it was really geared for, and that's community policing.
So you're thinking ending unshelteredness in 1 year. What's the roadmap?
So I explained it. Public safety emergency, so we can start marshaling the needs.
Oh,
we're gonna.
So you would declare an emergency?
Public safety emergency within that 2 weeks, working with council, so we can then begin the interim budget action to stand it. We're going to need to start $5 million to begin that prep and process. We've already started finding shelter locations, churches, community centers that we're going to repurpose at night.
Okay.
Because we're an emergency. Think about this. Think of it in an earthquake sort of thing. And all we're doing is we're repurposing assets at night, a church, a community center. Mm-hmm. We're going to use a facility. We don't need to set one cornerstone. We need to build a single thing. And then we're going to start putting the teams together. I've already started assembling homeless service providers. I've already spoke to the neighborhood emergency team coordinator. We have 1,100 volunteers that we're going to rally. And on April 1st or thereabouts, we're going to then implement the program where the volunteers are on the front side. We'll have nighttime staff members managing the nighttime shelters. And then we're going to start ending unsheltered homelessness, removing the encampments and the RVs. And it'll take a 90-day period in which to do that. But technically, it's all doable, and it's all been done before. So this is what essentially the mayor of Boise did, and he's been advising me on how he ended unsheltered homelessness after he lost this pivotal court case called Martin versus Boise. And he was required to have shelter in his community that met the level of individuals that were unsheltered. So we're going to do the same thing, and we have to do it quickly because you can't do it halfway. The county and the city are saying we're going to end or reduce homelessness by 50% by the end of 2025. Well, what about the other 50% that are still left on the street?
You said 90-day emergency. I feel like Portland has declared housing emergencies numerous times since like 2016. How is this going to be any different?
We're setting up nighttime shelters, Claudia. We're not going to say we're going to end homelessness. We're going to end unsheltered homelessness. Every community that has ended homelessness always ended unsheltered homelessness first. We've we've got ours upside down. We're trying to house an incredible amount of individuals. And while we're doing that, we have a tremendous amount of inflow into our community, homeless upon arrival. I was with the police officers three months ago, and we arrested a guy who just arrived from Florida in an RV. And the police officer arrested him, called the DA from Florida while we're sitting there in the Veracats Esplanade. And the DA said, nope, he's not in Florida. If you want to bring him back, fine. But we're not going to enforce the warrant. So we unhandcuffed the guy, we let him go, and then the police officer acted as a parking agent for the guy in his RV. And I said, hold on, you guys, you just released. He had an unregistered vehicle. I'm sure it's uninsured. Why'd you do that? Well, because we don't have enough shelter beds, that's considered the person's primary residence. And I thought that is such an upside down world where we have a RV running around town that's uninsured, unlicensed, and our officers are acting as parking attendants. That's an upside down world that we have to right size. Claudia, we have to provide basic nighttime shelter en masse to care for every single person on the road. And then we start enforcing our codes to care for everybody, both the housed and the unhoused. I really appreciate you keeping on this, because I want that disbelief to be clearly talked about, because this is how it works in most cities around the nation. It's not working in Portland. And again, this is not rocket science.
What I keep hearing basically is saying, hey, Portland has not attempted to do this one thing that, is working everywhere else, which is to do these emergency shelters.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing, Keith, is that we speak to a lot of homeless providers, like people who are out in the streets, providing services. And the big thing they bring back over and over again is like a lot of women are actually not comfortable going to these shelters because they're not policed. They are afraid they're going to get raped. There's also, men that are afraid they're going to get robbed. There's just a lot of, they feel a lot of anxiety of this lawlessness of these night shelters. So that's what I think. This is why I keep bringing this up. I'm like, are you sure? Because it's like a lot of homeless people don't want to go to these shelters. And so I'm asking you, how is this the silver bullet if it has been tried other places? It doesn't seem to work out really for the long term. And there are homeless people saying, I don't want to go there.
Yeah. Okay. So Claudia, it does work everywhere else except for Portland. So I just want to say it does work, and it's necessary in every community that I've visited who've ended unsheltered homelessness. But let me answer your question. So the shelters that I've had, you're right. I've been testing low barrier and medium barrier, and then there's also high barrier, which is clean and sober. And those are not what I'm professing. A low barrier is a open shelter where somebody's actively addicted or there might be behavioral health issues. And those are open at night from 9 to 7. And you can come and go because we're just trying to provide basic nighttime security and safety for that individual. Now, medium barrier shelter, which is the one we were using and partnering with United Gospel Mission and Church of Nazarene on I-205 in Powell, that's a medium barrier. That one opens at 9, it closes at 11, and it's a safe sleep shelter. Think about 3 or 4 women that come in, and it's a mat, so it's not a congregate shelter where you get one bunk bed away from your friends. We want you to bring your community in with your pets, 3 or 4 women, and we see it often. And those 3 or 4 women will go to the corner and they'll be in their social network or their safety community together. And pets are welcome. So you see, we really center that person in a trauma-informed way, but it's not going to be in a bunk bed. It's not a traditional congregate shelter where you get one bed and you got to be in that bed and your friends and your family aren't going to be around you. We let you bring in your street family or your biological family, and you can have 3 or 4 or 5 beds. And then what we try and do, Claudia, is we try and pick you off. It's warm in here. You don't have to go back on the street. We have care for you. We can help you with housing. We can help you with all these services. So it's that natural process where we're really trying to bring you back into society. And then in the day shelter, Claudia, as well, I've got a work systems program where we're going to be able to pay you an hour worth of work or 2 hours worth of work. We start doing dopamine replacement with working and providing with the community. It's really healthy and it's very focused on getting that person back on their feet. But it's never, ever handing out a tent saying it's safer to be on the street. Because I can tell you what's going on in those encampments at night, Claudia. It is horrific for women. The amount of addiction, guns, person-on-person crime. We have a lawless society going on in Portland, and we need to help those individuals back into our community.
Agreed. So here we're asking this question to all of the candidates that we'll be interviewing. When I used to be in a band, I would go on tour and I would leave Portland for months and end. There was always a thing that I would look forward to the most coming back home. You know, for me, it was eating a salad. Just being on the road, it's just hard to find good food. And so I would always I would really just imagine all the vegetables that I could get. Just think about what's in season right now. I want that. What restaurant will make it the best? Yes, that's what I want. I'm curious, when you leave Portland for your work, I know you're a busy person. What's the one thing that you're most excited to experience when you come back?
So, Claudia, my guilty pleasure is a tea burger. So there's a grill, a bar grill over there in North Portland on Lombard, and it's called the Twilight Room. And they got this tea, it's called the tea burger. And I'm telling you, it is big, it is juicy, and it has an egg, cheese, big old patty, special sauce. Man, there is nothing better than to get into one of those. Now, I'll want to be absolutely truthful. It's about maybe once every 2 years I'm getting into one of those, but it's a special occasion. All right.
Oh, I know the Twilight Room. So
Yeah.
I might see you there once every year or so.
I grew up there, and so that's my neighborhood bar, and it's where all my friends and I end up with, because just my name's on the ceiling, and it's just a great. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I graduated I got a master's degree at University of Portland. So one of the privileges is putting your chalk name on the ceiling. So it's always a great place to go back to.
That's awesome. Well, Keith, I sincerely appreciate you getting into the nitty gritty with me. It sounds like you have really thought about this, and I just appreciate your time and good luck.
And thank you. And, I'd like to ask your listeners to go to keithwilsonformayor.com. It's a big topic, but there's been a lot of good research, and I've got a wonderful team behind me who've already vetted this. And so it's something we're going to have to do, whether it's sooner, me as mayor, or later. We cannot have our community members living on the street in a civil society where we're caring for everybody.
Well, thank you, Keith. After we spoke with Keith Wilson, our following mayoral candidate interviewee, Leave Ostis, gave us the great idea of asking all the candidates what their campaign song would be. So we emailed Keith for his submission, and this is what he said. I would have to go with High Hope's Panic at the Disco. Both hope and action in the song's name and the band name, respectively, two things we desperately need in Portland. I must say ABBA's Take a Chance on Me is a close second, but I am certain I can help lead Portland out of this mess our leaders have gotten us into. Thanks again to Keith for his time. For even more local events and news, sign up for our daily newsletter, Hey Portland. We'll throw all links in the show notes. Well, that's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.